And welcome back to my channel. We had a phenomenal conference championship weekend, and we will recap here today. Talk about some of the great performances that we saw. The team title picture slowly but surely clearing up. We'll have a more definitive answer when we know who's actually going to compete, because there were some injuries that took place. We also had some pretty disappointing teams that we expected more from, and so we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But if you are new to my channel, I cover college track and field. I love the world of track and field through the lens of college. I find the team battle to be the most exciting. So please like, comment, share, subscribe. Be engaged. As you can see in the comment section, even though if I don't have a lot, I make sure that I reach out. Um, but we're going to get started, and I want to make sure that I review the format when we finally go ahead and get started. The first leg today will be sprints and hurdles. The second leg will be all of the field events. The third leg, we'll talk about our distance standouts. And our anchor leg today, we'll look at the team performances. And the reason for the format being that way today is because there were 13 number one performances, but none were in the distance events. And that doesn't surprise because normally in a championship meet, when it comes to distance athletes, it's less about time and more about competition. It's more of a tactical race than it is, let's see who can put up the fastest time or the best time. It's all about who can cross the finish line first. And so, again, we'll begin with the first leg. We always generally do sprints or hurdles. That's the quickest to go through, and that will be that way today. On the men's side, there were three new number one rankings, and on the women's side, there were three new number one rankings. So, without further ado, let's get started. Um, on the men's side in the 60-meter dash, we have uh, Israel Okan of Auburn. Again, Leroy Burrell knows what he's doing. This is an Olympic gold medalist. This is someone who at one point held the world record, a world champion. I mean, and he was great at Houston, and it seems that he's brought that same excellence to Auburn. 6'5" is now the tied NCAA leader. He is a freshman, one of the really talented youngsters at Auburn who just has a load of young talent from across the sea. It seems they have a ton of really great African talent that's shown up. And we thought they were something last year, but I think this year they have cemented themselves as one of the two best sprint corps. I will talk a little bit more about the other when we have our team performance recap. But hats off to the way things are going at Auburn. You know, this is a new name that we've mentioned, but they have a bevy of talent. And, you know, you would think um, with their top group having some injuries that at the beginning of the season and then losing Favor Ash that we would just it would be a step back for Auburn, and instead it's a step up. The only negative with this really talented youngster's performance is that he wasn't able to match it in the finals. Surprisingly, Jordan Anthony of Arkansas, that football player, football guys need to be running. He found a way in the finals to pull it off and upset. But Israel Oakland, we have to acknowledge this youngster is now tied for the NCAA lead. And I think he will take what he learned this weekend at the SEC championships over to the NCAA championships. SEC is tough. It is often revered as probably the fastest conference, but I think the Big 12 has kind of slowly but surely closed the door, specifically this season. They are closing in on the SEC, and they may be just as good. So it'll be a different ball game when we get to nationals. And then in the 200, you also have an Auburn guy. We mentioned him before multiple times, Makanakashi Charamba. He's now amongst the all-time greats, 20.13, an impressive time, one of the fastest in NCAA history. He is again in the top 10. It is an African indoor record. This is a incredible mark, 20.13. Outstanding time for this young man, and he's really kind of the anchor of this Auburn sprint group, and he's probably going to be anchoring that 4x1. And who's going to be on that? There's a lot of 6'5" talent at Auburn. Someone is getting left off, and I'm almost quite positive it won't be him. He did an excellent job anchoring. He's got that phenomenal closing speed because he is a great, tall, strong 200-meter runner. More from him later on. I think in this season, I think he's actually better suited for outdoor. So the fact that he's running 20.13 now makes me nervous. What is he going to do when we get to the outdoor season? And then you have the 400-meter dash. You have a young man we've also mentioned before. And a reminder, this young man is a 400 hurdler. He's not an open 400 runner other than in the indoor season. And that's Nathaniel Ezekiel of Baylor. He did officially run a 44.74, but it was ran at the Texas Tech indoor track, which is at altitude. So it's been uh, converted to 44.85. But nonetheless, he is officially sub 45, and we have only one sub 45 official 400 runner on record, although you see that 44.9 there on your screen. But unfortunately, again, altitude lowered it to over a little over 45. But nice to see Baylor Bear back on top in the 400 meter game. And he did a phenomenal job also anchoring that quartet. We'll see what they have when it comes to NCAA championship season, but Baylor had themselves quite a meet. On the women's side, we'll start with the 400, and I was pleased with the performances this weekend. I said this to you all in the last video where I just didn't feel that we were seeing enough from the 400 runners on the women's side. We're waiting for that big weekend, and it was this weekend where we saw a bevy of talent. We had two sub 50 runners in the 400. I did predict in the preview at the beginning of the season that it was going to take a 49 or low 50 point effort to win, and I'm really happy to see that that's pretty much going to come to fruition. Aaliyah Butler of Georgia, the Olympic gold medalist, she made the team individually and was on Team USA for the relay, runs a 49.78. She is amongst the top three fastest in NCAA indoor history and amongst the top five nationally outdoors. 49.78, no slouch time. And it's not an Arkansas runner, even though Isabella Whitaker did run 49.90. Hats off to Butler of Georgia and Coach Carol Smith Gilbert. Back to back years having an incredible 400 meter runner. Last year it was Christopher Morales Williams. This year it's Aaliyah Butler. Even though she really poured things on outdoors, she's matching her outdoor with her indoor. And so Coach Gilbert has everything going on there at Georgia, recruiting at a high level. And not only is she recruiting at a high level, her athletes are performing at a high level. It is a great situation there at Georgia. In the 60 hurdles, you have Mariana Beebe, Tennessee, a transfer running a 7.95. She matches the NCAA lead held by Onika Wilson. So now we have a tie at the 60-meter dash on the men's side and the 60 hurdles on the women's side. She exploded, one of two athletes under 8 seconds for Tennessee as they went 1-2. And things going really well for Coach Ross. They're at Tennessee. Not transferring, but moving on from North Carolina A&T to Tennessee, and he's got his teams performing at a pretty high level. They didn't have the team championship performance that they probably would have wanted, but they did score and perform adequately, at least I thought, as he's still building out his team. But the hurdlers seem to be in great form, specifically on the women's side. And then our last number one performance in the sprints and hurdles comes from the Georgia women 4x4. And this is courtesy of another 49-second run by Alita Butler. Georgia clocks a 3:26.42 amongst the top five all time in the 4x4 relay. That was an impressive time, even with Arkansas running a 3:27. Georgia really just was on a different level. And I think Arkansas will be an even stronger quartet come the NCAA Indoor Championship, but I think with a time of 3:26.42 and a 49 anchor from Butler, Georgia will be ready for whatever Arkansas has to throw at them. That's all. Let's keep that in mind. Georgia is really rounding into great form, I think, so on the women's side. Moving to our second leg, looking at our field events, there were two new number one performances from the men. One in the triple jump from Jonathan Ceremis in Missouri. He defeats Green of Oklahoma with a jump of 55 feet, 8.25 inches, 16.97 meters. I think it is fair to move him in the favorite seat when it comes to the triple jump because he's now beaten him twice, and he has kind of solidified his stranglehold on the number one ranking in the triple jump. Missouri becoming a destination for jumpers. We know about the Oklahomas, we know about the Floridas, the LSUs, the Nebraska, and the Arkansas. We need to make sure that when we mention in the Texas Techs, not forget them, and USC, let's not forget to mention Missouri in that really elite group of jump schools as well. And then also on the men's side, in the weight throw, you have Daniel Reynolds, a name we have not mentioned, of Wyoming, a smaller school, 82 feet, 2 3/4 inches, 25.06 meters. He is now the national lead in the men's weight throw. That field has gotten even better. I know that Akiji is the defending champion from Harvard, but he's going up against a heck of a field because there's, I believe, three gentlemen now above 80 feet, and he's only ranked fifth. And he hasn't hit a PR since January, so we'll see if he still has it in him to defend the champ, to be the defending champion yet again, and to win another title. I, it's looking tough. We'll have more to say when we do our preview, and I'm waiting to see who declares, not who qualifies, who declares, who says I'm going to go. Because again, there were some injuries this weekend. On the women's side, in the high jump, Rachel Glenn knocking on the door of the NCAA record in the high jump of Arkansas, 6 feet 6, 1.98 meters. Ooh, she really just knocked Jenna Rogers down. That's a full 2 inches ahead. 6'6" is a solid mark, and clearly the transfer from South Carolina to Arkansas has worked so well for her. Uh, she is a really talented athlete. She's not only a great low hurdler, she had a great high hurdle weekend as well. She's now all SEC in the high hurdles. I wonder how things are going to translate when she moves outdoors into the 400 hurdles. I think it's fair to say between her and Savannah Sutherland, that will be our one A and one B, and who will win the 400 hurdles. Could she win two events outdoors? She's part of what makes Arkansas great. I think they solidified their grip of the number one ranking, and I'm kind of convinced. I don't think anyone's going to be able to beat them. We'll talk more about the team performances later and who has an outside shot. But this weekend we saw what Arkansas is Arkansas. They showed up when they could, and they showed up everywhere. Then we have our NCAA record. Again, it was Amanda Moe, not Hannah Moe, even though Hannah had a great performance in the pole vault. Amanda Moe beating not only her sister, but also Chloe Timberg of Rutgers. Amanda Moe of Washington, 16 feet, 1 1/4 inches, 4.91 meters, another NCAA record, her second of the season. She leads a talented 1-2 punch from Washington. That's It almost feels like booking 18 points guaranteed from them automatically puts them in the team title. Well, it doesn't, but it's going to make them a top 10 team come national championships. And Amanda Moll is having a phenomenal indoor season. We can't ignore that. She's broken the NCAA record twice, kind of still in her sister's thunder, but they're twins. So, and Hannah Moll jumped 15.9. Who's to say they both don't jump 16 feet in a couple weeks? We'll see. In the triple jump, Amelia Shostrand of San Jose State. We mentioned her in the preview. We haven't spoken of her in a long while, but she matches the number one mark, 45 feet, 11 3/4 inches in the triple jump, 14.01 meters. She's one of the ones that chose to stay at San Jose State and not transfer, and it's worked out well for her. The coaching there is clearly top notch, that she's now again tied for the number one ranking. In the weight throw, you have Antoinette Nabwe. She's improved upon her mark of Minnesota, 79 feet, 5.5 inches, 24.22 meters. Back to back weeks as the NCAA leader in this event. Again, they lost Shelby Frank, but she's kind of taking over that space as the number one weight thrower. And then our last field event is really more of a multi event. It's the pentathlon. Pippi Lotta Enoch of Oklahoma, 4,593 points. That is the NCAA lead. That defeats Jaden O'Brien of Notre Dame, who ran a personal best at the ACC Championships. She had a great meet herself. But Pippi finally put it together. We've been waiting for over a year for her to get back to this. It's going to be an interesting meet between her and Jaden O'Brien, because that was an outstanding performance. 4,593 points, outstanding for her. And part of what helped Oklahoma have a phenomenal weekend. We thought it would be Texas that would have a little bit of an easier time in the SEC, because we saw what their football team did. The track team, not so much. On the women's side, they were second. On the men's side, they were third. Hats off to Oklahoma. Meanwhile, Texas women were 12th and the men were 14th. So rough weekend on that Texas side, but they'll get things together. They have some injuries, and then, they're better suited for the outdoors. But I think we're learning just how tough the SEC is, especially now with all those talented teams. Now, moving to our third leg, we're looking at the distance standouts. And these, you won't see a lot of pictures of these athletes, but I just thought I'd mention them. On the men's side, you have Trent McFarland of Michigan winning the Big Ten champion in the mile. I wanted to acknowledge him because going into this meet, he wasn't even considered a threat because of that great Washington and Oregon talent. They have not had any issue with the distance events since joining. They have made traditional powers in the Big Ten, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Indiana look like nothing. They have stepped in and just hammered, and I just knew that was going to happen in the mile, and he shocked everyone. He broke his coach's meet record in the prelims to qualify, and then ran the smartest technical race in the finals. No sub 4 minute mile in the finals for the Big Ten, but it was just the fact that he, was very gutsy and smart, ran a really great tactical race. Also, there was Ethan Strand of North Carolina winning the 5K, defeating Gary Martin of Virginia. Those are two of the best distance runners in the country. They're the top two in the mile. These are two of the greatest distance runners, really, in history of the NCAA. And Ethan Strand, again, proving that he's just a cut above Gary Martin. We'll see what happens in a couple weeks, who runs what at the national championships, but that was a great performance by Ethan. It's not a qualifying time in the 5K, but he's amongst the elite in the mile, the 3K, and the 5K. On the women's side, you can't ignore the super freshman Peyton O of Arkansas winning the 5K. She's going to qualify for the national championships as a freshman amongst the top five, I believe. That was an outstanding performance for her. She was a part of, one of those huge 10 team points for Arkansas. And we keep wondering, when are they going to have a distance program to match the sprinters? They used to always have it, and now we see they're back right at it. And Arkansas, I think, is going to just have a stranglehold on the women's game for a while. Michaela Rose of LSU winning another SEC title in the 800. She's not as dominant this year. I think she's starting off a little slow. I think that week or two of snow, where they had a delay due to the snow, has kind of delayed a lot of what's going on in LSU. We didn't see Brianna Liston do what we were expecting her to do in the 60. She couldn't reel in Kayla Jackson, a Detroit Renaissance product from the great state of Michigan, by the way. She got out and, Liston couldn't reel her in. And I honestly believe, had they had that week of competition, they would be further along, which tells me when it comes to the indoor championships, they're going to be even more ready. I think they now know what they need to work on. And I think that goes also for Michaela Rose. I'm still waiting for her to get under 2 minutes. She did it last indoor season. We're waiting to see her do it now. Also, the last thing I wanted to talk about on the women's side of the distance standout was the Oregon women dominating the Big Ten. I mean, absolutely dominating. From the mile, the 3K, the 5K, the DMR, the 800. They had multiple runners. They swept, I think, the 3K and the 5K. In the mile, what an incredible performance by them. Not 100% certain about the 3K, but the mile and the 5K, they definitely went 1, 2, 3 in the 5K and 1, 2 in the mile. Great performances by Oregon. No trouble with the Michigans, the Michigan States, the Wisconsins, the Indianas, the Penn States. They had no trouble with them, and not even with Washington. And yes, Michigan is down, and Michigan State is trying to rebuild back to that cross-country championship level they had. And they're, got a really young talent in Rachel Forsyth. But none of them really had the skill and talent that Oregon had. And Oregon's dominance was on full display. And I think they're the only team that can challenge on a team title level Arkansas. Because they have the sprinters, they have the hurdlers. They don't really necessarily have the jumpers the way they used to, but they have enough to give Arkansas a run for their money. And our final leg will be the team performances, and we're looking on the men's side. We'll look at the best and worst. The best was Texas A&M, and I think USC. Texas A&M made a really strong push for them to be the number one ranking over Arkansas and USC. That looked like a fully complete team. They had some pretty good sprinters, some great hurdlers, solid in the distance. We saw their DMR shock the world. What a great performance by Texas A&M. This is probably Pat Henry's most complete team since he's been at A&M, and that's saying something because he has won national titles there. And USC, we saw what they were capable of in the Big One, in the Big Ten, and we know that they've been one or two. Uh, and Johnny Bracken's put up that good long jump performance, and it's possible that they're going to have two guys in the top four at nationals in the long jump to go along with their sprints. They have an array of sprinters in the 60, the 2, the 4, the 4x4 relay, the hurdles, the jumps. They're going to be a really tough team to beat come national championship time. And I think the worst has to go to, unfortunately, a team that I love, Florida. That was a horrible meet. They finished dead last. That was the worst performance in school history. They had a very rough weekend and a surprisingly strong weekend of Florida sports. They were the bad one. And it was due to an enormous amount of injuries. No Genoa McIver, Wanya McCoy, he looks questionable even for nationals. Their youngsters didn't, perform the way we thought they would. Granted, it's their first time in SEC, but it just did not look like a typical Florida team. They looked noticeably off in every area. I think the only event where there was a PR was in the 60 hurdles, Damaris Waters. That was a disappointing performance. I'm not sure if he even qualified. I think he's on the outside looking in. We'll see who declares and says we're going to compete, but we'll see. But they're not sending a strong team indoors. And perhaps with all the injuries, they just rest some and get ready for outdoors. On the women's side, I think the best will go to Oregon and Arkansas. I've said enough today on why. What a weekend both schools have had. I think they're two of the best programs in recent memory. Arkansas looks like a juggernaut as always, but this is to me one of the best Oregon teams we've seen in quite a while. They're very strong, and they're capable of scoring a lot of points everywhere, and that includes the throws. We can't ignore Jada Ross. We'll see what happens come championship time, but this is a really strong pair of teams, and I'm interested to see who declares for what to help figure out who wins that team title battle. And I'll say the worst was Ohio State. I expected for them to show up in a better way than they did in the Big Ten. They were almost an afterthought. And they have dominated this conference with great sprinters, great hurdlers, great jumpers, great throwers, and great middle distance runners. They've been the complete Big Ten team for a very long time. And it didn't look that way this year. This was a really disappointing meet for them. I'm almost certain that the traditional Big Ten powers now recognize have what it means to have a USC, a UCLA, a Washington, and an Oregon added to their already tough conference, and how they were really able to hammer those schools, um, the traditional Big Ten teams, more so than they ever have been. And then you can't ignore, Illinois. They're going to come because they finished second with a bunch of field event athletes. So I think the Ohio States, the Michigan States, the Michigans, the Indianas, the Penn States need to look at how they're recruiting and how they're developing, because going up against USC, UCLA, the Oregons, and Washingtons is not going to get any easier. In fact, it's going to get worse. So they're going to have to start out recruiting and out developing. They're capable of doing it, and they have the resources. So that is our episode for today. Great meet. I thought the great meets, excuse me. I thought this was one of the best conference championships weekends that I saw. It was constant reviewing my phone and looking at a laptop and looking at streaming on television. What a phenomenal weekend is this. I hope we can get it more like how it is with the college basketball, where we're just, there's one network that has an array of it everywhere. And we got treated to a lot of great performances this weekend. Even if they weren't number ones, we saw just how deep some of these teams are. And we also saw, you know, how thin some of these teams are. It'll be interesting to see who declares for and for what, and how this team title battle forms. Because I think this will be probably one of the more competitive indoor championships we've seen in a while. And that's our show. So please, thank you for following and listening to me. I ask that you share, like, and subscribe. Please comment. Uh, and I really do engage. I also have a Facebook group if you would like to join. I love college track and field. It's on Facebook. Just go ahead and fill out that form as to why you want to join. And I only have that to avoid the bots that keep trying to join the group. But please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I will see you again for our preview video. And we're not putting that out until we get an actual declaration list. Thanks again for your support, and see you next time.